Since more than 20 years, there is experience on a free trade agreement, NAFTA, in between Canada, US, and Mexico. What experiences can be learned? What lessons can be learned from that?
Well, there are many experiences. First of all, that it's a corporate-led agreement. And today we see in Mexico how the big winners of NAFTA have been the big corporations, both in the United States as well as Mexican companies that are able to export and invest abroad. The great losers are the people in the rural areas, also the small and medium companies that bankrupted by the tens of thousands, and also the national industry. Mexico used to have a strong national industry. We used to produce trucks, trains, and we used to be more self-sufficient in terms of fostering our own national development. All that has been dismantled in favor of large corporations. I remember when I was a kid, my father would take me to the national siderurgic plants and see how Mexico was building things with a national industry. All that was dismantled. And in general, the Mexican population has lost also a lot of what I would say our culture of food, our food culture. You see more and more middle-class people buying goods from American supermarkets. And these are goods that are brought prefabricated in the United States and that are very bad for the health of the people. Mexico has become the most obese country in the world, in part thanks to NAFTA. So the basic staple, which used to be nutritious food based on grains, on vegetables, on corn mainly, has been slowly being substituted by cheap imports, by junk food from the United States. No? So the whole culture of Mexico has been changing, and this has affected a lot the health of the people.
Looking back to the negotiations on NAFTA and to the times before it started, it was actually clear that the Mexican small-scale farmers would compete with the big farming companies in the US, and they wouldn't be able to compete with them, talking about corn, for example. How do you remember this time of negotiations on NAFTA and the public opinion on that in Mexico?
Well, of course, there are farmers' organizations that still subsist, and they point at the fact that millions, we can say about 2 million rural units or rural families were displaced from the Mexican countryside when NAFTA came into effect. But before NAFTA, farmers in Mexico didn't compete with the United States large agro-industrial companies. They didn't aim to compete with them because they didn't aim to export. They were based more on what is called subsistence agriculture, which meant that they respected the land, they respected the land plots that were owned collectively before NAFTA. They were owned collectively. This is one more thing that President Salinas did along with NAFTA. It modified Article 27 of the Constitution so that the land plots could be subdivided and sold. The land plots that they were called ejidos in Mexico. So all this was transformed, and the whole notion for the modernizers in Mexico, the whole notion of subsistence agriculture was and is a very backward thing. For them, food is a commodity that has to be traded, and you have to make business with it. So this is the whole rationale that lies under NAFTA. And this is one thing that the farmers, rural farmers, and traditional peasant campesinos in Mexico do not were never in agreement of. They still regard the land as a sacred element from which we get our nourishment, and the indigenous communities respect the land and do not overproduce. They produce what they need and what they can share with each other, and do not understand this trading rational, this trading rational of commodities, no?
So NAFTA even removed an effort of the Mexican Revolution, the Ejido land, which was not able to be sold, and it neglected corn as a holy grain. So it changed culture, as you said. Do you focus on things like that when you do research with your Mexican Action Network on free trade, or what do you focus on?
Well, we focus on many things. The Mexican Action Network on Free Trade, or La REMALC, as it's known, it's a network of many organizations. It includes farmers and peasants organizations, like, for example, ANEC or the Chihuahua el Frente Democrático Campesino de Chihuahua, and many others. But it also includes labor unions, it includes environmental organizations, includes organizations of women, and all of this came together only last week to make a large event at the Mexican Senate with senators against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So all the lessons that we've learned from NAFTA are being utilized today. In this large event, people from Peru came, from Chile, from the United States, from Canada. So it was an international event against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And Mexico, I think, is the best place because Mexico is the first country that has been experiencing the effects of these free trade agreements. It's already 22 years of NAFTA, and the country is in a real disaster. I mean, there are more poor people than before. I mean, poverty has only increased. Mexico is the only country in Latin America where in the last few years, together with Honduras, and it's not coincidence, that in the last few years, poverty hasn't receded. So to say that NAFTA has been a success, yes, it has been a success for a handful of corporations, a handful of companies.